Okay, today we're going to talk about trig properties. So trig properties can be very useful in proving trig identities, which I'll make a video on later. Basically, proving trig identities is where a problem kind of just asks you to prove that something equals something. So, for example, sine of x times cotangent of x equals cosine of x. These trig properties help you simplify the elements in the first part of the equation to prove that it equals the second part. So, the first type of trig properties we have are called reciprocal properties. Ignore the fact my pen is about to run out. Reciprocal properties. So, reciprocal properties are basically just properties in which you can write secant of x, cosecant of x, cotangent of x as 1 over sine, 1 over cosine, and 1 over tangent, respectively. So, let me write them out. So, secant of x is equal to 1 over cosine of x. That's the first one. Cosecant of x is equal to 1 over sine of x. And cotangent of x is equal to 1 over tangent of x. Now, the way I memorize this is I just kind of notice that secant and sine x both start with s. Cosine x and cosecant x both start with c's. So I notice that these just kind of flip the first letter. And cotangent, I just kind of remember cotangent and tangent. This one's just kind of simple. Okay, the next type of properties are called quotient properties. They're called quotient properties because they involve tangent and cotangent, and you can rewrite those as one way, but you can also rewrite them in a different way using quotients. So, let's write out tangent first. Tangent of x equals sine of x over cosine x. Now, this should be common knowledge, but if you don't know that, tangent of x equals sine of x over cosine x. But we can also rewrite this as secant x over cosecant x. Now, the reason why this works is, let's break up this part first. Okay, so, secant of x. If we recall to our previous property, we know that secant of x equals 1 over cosine of x. You notice I memorized it because of the letter change. And then 1 over cosecant x would equal sine of x. And you want to know why that works? If we look at cosecant of x, that's going to equal 1 over sine of x. If we do 1 over this, it's going to be 1 over that. And you're going to have to divide this by 1, and this ends up multiplying it by 1. And when you divide a fraction, you're going to end up multiplying, so it's going to end up being sine of x. So this kind of cancels each other out, and you get 1 over cosecant x equals sine of x. So what you end up getting, if you take these two parts, is you end up getting sine of x over cosine x, which is what we originally said tangent of x equals. Now, the same can be said for cotangent of x. Cotangent of x, if cotangent of x equals 1 over tangent of x, then that means it should equal cosine of x over sine of x, right? But we can also rewrite this one as cosecant of x over secant of x. Now, let's break this one up again. So, cosecant of x. Cosecant of x is the same thing as 1 over sine of x. 1 over secant of x should equal cosine x. You take these two parts, put them together, you get cosine of x over sine of x, which is what the original said that cotangent of x equaled. Now, a way I like to memorize this is, if you look at this part here, you'll notice that the first letter of cosine x and cosecant x match. So it's kind of like having the same letter but just different stuff afterwards. That's the way I memorize it. It has the same s here, just secant here, sine x here. Okay, now we're going to talk about Pythagorean properties. In this property, we're gonna show that cosine squared x plus sine squared x equals 1. So that's the first Pythagorean property. But there's 3 of them. Also here, you'll notice that I wrote cosine squared x, and you might be thinking that's a little weird, but you have to put the squared right in between the cosine and the x, because that means that you're squaring this entire thing. If you just put the squared here, it's going to make it look like you're just taking cosine x squared. So just, for future reference, put your squared here if you're squaring the entire thing. So, to get the other 2 Pythagorean properties, we're going to divide everything either by cosine squared x or by sine squared x. Excuse me. So, let's divide everything by cosine squared x first. So, cosine squared x divided by cosine squared x, that's 1. Sine squared x divided by cosine squared x, that looks like it should be tangent squared x. You'll notice that this looks very similar to sine of x over cosine x equals tangent of x. This is the same property, it's just squared. It still works that way. So this is going to be tangent squared x. And then 1 divided by cosine squared x, that should equal secant squared x, right? So there's our second Pythagorean property. Now, in our third one, since we divided by cosine squared x first, we're going to divide everything in this one property by sine squared x. So, cosine squared x divided by sine squared x, that's going to be cotangent squared x. It's the same thing as cosine x over sine x equals cotangent x. It's just squared, so plus sine squared x divided by sine squared x, that's going to be 1. And then 1 divided by sine squared x, that should equal cosecant squared x. So here are your 3 properties. The most important thing to memorize is this first one, because you can really just figure out the second one and the third one by dividing everything by either cosine squared x or sine squared x. So really just focus on this one and the other 2 will come to you.